Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar, Restoring Our Natural World. Is it time to try something new? We're delighted that so many of you could join us today. My name is Liam McAleese. I'm the Director of Our Natural World at the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, and I'll be facilitating the session this morning. For the benefit of people listening, we are describing ourselves. So I am a tall white man, black hair with increasingly bits of grey in, brown eyes. I'm sitting in Cumbria in my back room with a white wardrobe behind me and my webcam strategically placed so you can't see my children's toys. I'm very grateful for you taking the time to join us today. I'm particularly grateful for our wonderful panelists who will give a wave I hope, when I say their name and introduce them. So welcome Gillian Burke, TV presenter, producer and biologist. Welcome Trúan Restorick, founder and chief executive of Hubbub. Welcome Jim Ayrton, natural capital strategy and planning manager at United Utilities. Welcome Kene Umiesiebu, campaigns director at Tesco's. And Caroline Mason, Chief Exec at the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, and also my colleague Luna Diesel, the Communication Manager at Esme. So this is the third in a series of Unlocking Change webinars, which aim to bring our new strategy to life. We launched our new strategy in October, and Caroline will speak a little bit more about that in a minute. And today we pose the question, restoring our natural world, is it time to try something new? We ask this because restoring our natural world is a key area of our new strategy and also links to our commitment to addressing the causes and impacts of climate change. And we ask this question because of the scale of the climate and nature crisis, and its link to injustice and inequality requires a step change in action. And this action will involve the scaling up of traditional and tested ways of restoring nature. For example, the brilliant work undertaken by many environmental and conservation NGOs across the UK, and we need to see more of this great work. But no one would argue that just more of the same, however good it is good enough. So to unlock change at scale, we believe we require new ways of working, new and unconventional alliances and partnerships, ranging from conservation groups, businesses, shareholders, farmers, fishers, community groups, and young people. And this discussion aims just to give a few highlights of where this is already happening and to generate discussion as to where we can see these approaches scale. A few practicalities before we start. So live captioning is available for this session. Please click the closed captioning or the CC button at the bottom of your screens to view these. We'd like to thank AI Media for providing the live captions for us today. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers once we've heard from all of our speakers. Please use the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screens, to submit questions whilst the panelists are speaking. And you can also vote for questions submitted by another participant if you'd really like to see that one asked, and you can do that by clicking the thumbs up icon next to the questions. My colleague Luna will be helping curate these questions throughout, and we'll come to her at the end of the discussion to help pose some of them. So I know a lot of you here today will have some specific questions about our strategy and processes, and there is quite a lot online. Luna will put some links online on that. We're trying to answer questions that involve all of our panelists first, and then after go to more Esme specific questions. We'll hang around slightly after the end of the webinar to answer more questions. We'll be on Twitter this afternoon and also have a further seminar planned on the 14th of January to answer more specific questions. We'll be tweeting about this event using the hashtag Restoring Nature, so please join us in that. And we're also recording this webinar to share on our website along with a written transcript. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I'm really pleased to introduce Caroline Mason, Chief Exec at Esme Fairbairn, to give a brief introduction into our new strategy. Thanks, Caroline.
Hello, everyone. I'm Caroline Mason. Thank you for coming and spending, I know, what is a very valuable time with us today. I'm a tall, middle-aged white woman with very short, tufty hair, which sadly is going grey quicker than I'd like. I'm generally got quite a smiley face, and I'm sitting at my kitchen table at home with my dog at my feet, who is keeping my feet warm. So I wanted to start by saying that this is really a new departure. This new strategy is, which we're very excited about, is a new departure for Esme, and we are trying something new. I think Esme over the last 60 years has done some extraordinary work, but our strategy was to be very responsive, to fund other people's outcomes, to spread the jam, as someone said, very thinly. We were not proactive. We didn't have views or goals of our own. And that was fine for the times, but the times are radically different now. You know, not only do we have COVID-19, the emergency around climate change, the stark growth in inequality, the exposure of real structural racism, and the growth of digital AI, all of which will fundamentally change everything for the future. So our journey has been about trying to understand what it is that in the 21st century, a foundation like Esme can, what it should be and what it can be. And I think without losing the essence of what it does well. And we did a lot of consultation and spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I think it breaks down into three areas, I would say. One is, the first is for us to know our purpose. So we have now identified where it is that we think we can contribute most, where we have most expertise, legitimacy, and a real genuine passion, and where we specifically at Esme can make a difference. Secondly, we need to know our privilege and understand it and use it well. And that isn't just in the grant making, that's in our networks, it's in our endowment, it's in our ability to commission, to convene, to broker. And so we are extending the toolkit beyond grant making in order to deliver against our impact. And also we need to know our place. That's the third thing. And as my daughter very cleverly said to me when I was trying to explain this, she said, "Oh, so you mean you want to be part of a jigsaw rather than part of a pyramid?" And I said, yes, that's exactly what I mean. So where is it that we fit? Who can we work with? How can we leverage as much from our partnerships and relationships to generate as much impact as we possibly can? And I won't go into too much detail about what that means in our natural world, because I think that's been covered separately, but just to say that we are really interested in finding new ways, as well as funding good solid work, but we are also interested in new, different, disruptive ways of making change happen. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Caroline. And as we've said, there'll be further details that will be dropped in with links in the chat, as well as opportunities for detailed questions later on. So I'm going to move us on and introduce our first speaker this morning. So if I can introduce Gillian Burke. So Gillian Burke joined the BBC Springwatch brand in 2018, having also recently presented Blue Planet, co-presented Blue Planet. Gillian has many roles, including at a number of wildlife NGOs as a producer, researcher, director, and biologist. Welcome, Gillian. We're pleased to have you here today.
Hi, everyone. Just unmuting myself, trying not to look like an amateur on Zoom, having done it for long enough now. Thank you very much, Liam. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everyone, the whole team, actually, for inviting me to speak. Just for the benefit of an audio description, so I am a Black woman of mixed Asian African descent. I'm sitting in my dining room, which has now become my home office as well, with Haitian artwork, some Beatles postcards that my son collects, and an all-seeing eye that my daughter painted sometime during our first lockdown. So I've given up trying to hide my family life from my Zoom life. It's all here to see, kind of. So that's who I am and where I am and what I look like. I've actually found this a really difficult talk to prepare for, and generally, if I find things difficult, I procrastinate. I'll find everything else better to do than the actual thing I'm meant to be doing. I hope I'm not alone in that. But I've learned to knuckle down, and I really ask myself, like, what is so difficult? Because at 7 minutes, in fact, I must start my timer so I don't overrun. 7 minutes of talking, what's so difficult? And I realized it's because of this question that's been put to us. Is it time to try something new? Now, I want to acknowledge it's an important question, clearly. And I'd also say, with the greatest respect, it's a question that really, it just sucks. I'm sorry, it does. Because for me, I know what that immediately makes me think is, okay, what hasn't worked? And it requires a little bit of introspection and self-reflection, appraisals, all that stuff that I don't really enjoy doing. So I thought I would maybe do my sort of initial talk, and obviously there may be questions later, which I'll be happy to answer if there are any. But I just thought I would talk about the things that I feel in my industry, in my line of work as a science communicator, TV producer and presenter, the things that may not have worked. So here we go. So I began working in natural history TV in the late 90s. And I have to just resist that feeling instantly of thinking, wow, that sounds really old. I'm going to flip that and say, actually, what it has done is it's given me some perspective and a little bit of experience, hopefully, as well. So the natural history film industry in the last few years especially has come under fire for not communicating the scale of the growing environmental crisis, not communicating that to the wider public. And there's that, I guess, claims that there's been too little too late. So I can only tell this story from my perspective, which is that for a long time, it felt like audiences weren't ready to hear. At least that's what the numbers told us, because if there was a faintest whiff in our program making of the kind of gloom and doom, as they call it, it would have viewers sort of lunging for their remote controls to switch channels when there's still such a thing, and they'd go elsewhere. So the learning for us was, okay, so it doesn't work to tell people the cold hard facts. Why don't we try something where we just celebrate the natural world in all its wonder and its beauty? The story we told ourselves is something I still hear today, actually, even today, listening to the Today program this morning, and they were interviewing the new appointment, the new director of the Natural History Museum. And there was talk of, if we educate people and get people to care about the natural world, then they'll do more to protect it. I think there's truth in that. I'm not saying there's no truth in that, but it is a story we've been telling ourselves for the last 20, 30 years, at least in my sector, my industry, in natural history filmmaking. And we've probably added another chapter to this story more recently, particularly this year, as I think to a certain extent, a greater extent, we've all started to really recognize the value and make that connection with having green and blue spaces around us, so that the natural world isn't something that's just out there that needs protecting. It's something that we need around us. We've certainly felt the benefit of having access to green and blue spaces through lockdowns. So we've added this extra kind of chapter to our story, which is we don't just need to celebrate nature and care for it. It's actually good for us. It's good for our mental health, our physical well-being. And that if we value it in this way, then we'll actually look after it and protect it. However, this is maybe where the science hat comes back on. It's like we look at the numbers again. The numbers tell us a different story. So across all environmental sectors and indicators, and I don't need to labor the point because I know all of you will be well versed with all the stats, but essentially all environmental indicators globally show that there's a worsening. So habitat loss, biodiversity loss, soil health, air quality, plastics, you name it, things are getting worse, and the rate is also increasing in terms of the deterioration. So the numbers tell us that whatever we're doing hasn't been working. So that's the uncomfortable bit. So for me, this is where it's time, at least, my work in my industry, it's time to look at blind spots. It's time to look at, well, what are we missing? What hasn't worked? And this question, is it time to try something new? So from a communication point of view, I mean, actually in every possible way, this year has changed everything. Like the environmental indicators I was talking about, trust, which is hugely important in pretty much everything we do, actually. Trust has also been eroded. And the nature of mass communication across all the media platforms that are now available has done a lot. I mean, it's done a lot of good and can do a lot of good, but it has also eroded this sense that we have trustworthy sources of information. So trust is at an all-time low, or maybe not, I don't know about an all-time low, but it's certainly at a low point. So I think that the default position for people is to be wary now of proposals and mission statements and public announcements. And one of the questions I now get asked, I used to get asked whenever I gave a talk or did any kind of presentation about the environment, the question I'd get asked is, well, what can we do? That question has been superseded recently with a question that I now get asked a lot, particularly after a green proposal or green recovery proposal has been forward, is this a case of greenwashing? Which suggests to me that we have a lot of work to do in terms of earning trust or restoring trust, whichever way you want to look at it. But I do think the contact I have with the audiences that are engaged already with the natural world, with environmental issues, conservation, is that we're craving this sort of integrity. I think even when you look at our storytelling, and I guess, this is where I work from. It's about communicating and telling stories. When we look at our fictional characters, our storytelling, what we want from our heroes is integrity. So I think that sort of bleeds into our real world as well. What we want from our leaders, whether it's in politics or business or in the conservation and environmental sector, is integrity. So we're not trying to second guess the motives behind the words and the deeds. So it all sounds very ideological, and it's hard to see the kind of real world applications in all of this. And I realize I risk sounding like a big hippie right now, but I know I can say this because one of the really great things about the environmental sector and all of you here today is that if we were to really distill and crunch down why we're all here, it's because we want to make the world a better place, which is a lovely sentiment. It's a beautiful sentiment. So hopefully we can keep this at the front and center, at the heart of what we do as we move forward in working out what hasn't worked or what was working in the past but has stopped working, checking our blind spots, and really, really pushing ourselves forward to try something new. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to Trúin, I believe. Is that right? Trúin, hang on a second.
It is indeed, yeah.
I've just realized, what I haven't done is prepared Trúin's introduction.
It's all right.
Leave that to Trúin to do more beautifully than I could. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gillian. Trúan, you've been introduced. So Trúan Restorick is founder and chief exec of Hubbub, the award-winning charity which transforms the way environmental messages are communicated by bringing people and organisations together as a force for good. Welcome, Trúan.
Thanks a lot, Liam. And I've been asked to introduce myself, which I found incredibly awkward, as I'm a sort of late 58-year-old bloke. Definitely way ahead of everybody else on the Going Grey stakes, sitting in a very big jumper because I'm in a roof in my house in Clapham with no heating. So that's who I am. And I'm just going to give you a very quick sort of background to sort of creating change and trying to do something different from a very personal perspective through the charity I set up as a belated midlife crisis 6 years ago called Hubbub. And the aim of Hubbub is to take environmental messages to a mainstream audience. And actually, I started with a question: things aren't working, the science is looking pretty dire, we need to do something different. So we deliberately set up to do something different and be disruptive. And we started with £25,000, much to my wife's fury. 3 months in, we had £500, and I thought, God, we'd really gone wrong here. But this year, the charity is just about 5 million. 95% of our funding is from corporate funding, and we were awarded Charity of the Year by Charity Times this year. So I just wanted to go through what happened in that journey in 6 minutes. The first thing we decided to do was actually to not frame the environmental debate in the way that other charities were. So we talk about things that we think people are directly passionate in their everyday lives, which is the homes they live in, their neighbourhoods, the clothes they wear, and the food they eat. We decided not to look like any other environmental charity, which is why we've got a slightly strange name and a very lifestyle-y approach on our website. And we decided to set up like an advertising agency so that we could work with lots of different businesses on lots of different projects all at once and build close relationships with those businesses. So that was the background to the way the organisation was structured. And then we had a set of principles. And the first principle was a small environmental charity can't change the world on its own. We need to collaborate, and we were happy to collaborate with big business. So one example of this is we wanted to transform recycling on our high streets. We knew that needed lots of people to do it, and we knew we needed a city council to get involved. So we asked 26 businesses to each give us £10,000, and we went to people like Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, Asda, Starbucks, a lot of the retailers, and we got 27 organisations to give us £270,000. We then went to Leeds City Council and said, please, can we play in your city? Give us the ability to put recycling infrastructure in your city. And we tripled the amount of recycling in Leeds within 6 months. The corporates have backed it. We're so keen to expand it. It's now been expanded to 3 other cities, including Edinburgh, Dublin, and Swansea, and will be extended again. So that's a way we've taken a collaborative approach to businesses where they've got a problem which is too big for one of them to deal with, and we act as the facilitator. The second thing we decided was everything we should do should be built around insight. So when lockdown hit, we did lots and lots of public polling to assess the mood of the nation. And that ability to work out where the public was at helped us to quite quickly transform some of our activities to things that we knew people were really concerned about. So with O2, we've launched a campaign called Community Calling, which is asking people to donate their unused smartphones. They're digitally cleaned, and then we're going to be giving out 10,000 of those phones to people who are digitally isolated with free data and training provided by O2. So that's the way that we're fighting e-waste, but also dealing with the social disruption of digital isolation, which is massively important at the moment. And then we also saw people were hugely concerned about food waste. So we were able to go to Tesco and say, look, it's a great time now to talk to your customers about food waste. We ran a trial campaign with them. We helped their customers reduce food waste by over 70%, saving £16 a week. But those campaigns were driven by the insight that we gathered. We also want to learn fast and fail cheap. So we persuaded Starbucks to put a 5p charge on their disposable cups in a small number of their restaurants, 36 restaurants, just to see what would happen. And they gave that 5p donation to us. What happened was it doubled the uptake of reusable cups. They didn't lose any sales and their customer reaction was incredibly positive. So they then extended that to over 900 stores, again with the donation coming to us, and that's enabled us to invest in anti-littering campaigns. We've invested over £1 million in coffee recycling facilities across the UK, and we've been testing reuse schemes as well. So doing something small with a business, proving it works, and then going to scale was really important. Another one of our principles was we didn't care if nobody had heard of Hubbub. It was the change that was more important. So we've been working for 4 years with IKEA on a campaign to boost the sustainability awareness and knowledge of their customers called Lagom. Nobody knows it's us doing it, but it's had a phenomenal impact. It's been measured by the University of Surrey. So we don't care if nobody knows it's us, it's the change that's important. And similarly, we have a network of over 100 community fridges around the UK redistributing food, all run by different charities. Again, we don't really care about being associated with that. It's the local charities that have the ability and connections, and what we can do is make it happen through providing funding and links to the businesses. And then the final principle we have was about being entrepreneurial. So when we do something that we think works and we can take it to scale, we look to invest in that through a social enterprise, which is fully owned by the charity. And this is where Caroline's mention of the fact that Esme Fairbairn has a whole range of ways they can support you comes in so handy, because they gave us a £100,000 loan to get that business started. And thanks to that, that business is now contributing about £300,000 a year to the charity and has £1 million turnover. That would never have happened without Esme's support. And similarly, we're just about to launch a massive campaign in Manchester all around community engagement and climate change. We know we can get the businesses behind that, but we also know it takes time. And we went to Esme Fairbairn and said, look, trust us, we can do this. If you can underwrite the cost of that campaign, we will then pay you back once we get all the corporates aligned. That enabled us to go ahead, it enabled us to get the City Council involved, but crucially it gave the businesses confidence that it was going to happen. So think about Esme as a range of providing support, which is way beyond the grant funding. And just to finally finish, I think our view is that the level of appetite for corporates to get involved in sustainability has never been so high. It's going to grow with COP coming along. So there's a real opportunity to get businesses involved. There's a real need, as Gillian has so rightly said, to have trust and authenticity, and partnering with charities is a way for businesses to do that. And the final thing is you can do stuff at scale, but crucially also working with a business infuses your culture with different types and different ways of working. And you can learn so much by talking to different people about their work and their priorities. And that actually has a massive advantage for you as an organisation. I think I was a minute over. Sorry, Liam, but that was my mad dash through Hubbub. Thank you very much for your time and for listening.
That's great. Thanks, Trym. Like Gillian, I can't possibly summarise what you said and do it justice. So I'm going to swiftly move on to Jim. Jim Ayrton has worked in the water industry for over 10 years in a range of roles, from strategy to operations at United Utilities, the water company in the northwest of England. Jim, welcome.
Thanks, Liam. And just for the purposes of description, I'm a white male in my mid-ish 30s with brown hair and a truly ridiculous moustache that I started growing at the beginning of the first lockdown, with no idea how long all of this was going to be going on for. I'm currently sat in my spare bedroom at home, surrounded by boxes, because we're doing some decorating, but hopefully the camera is at a sufficient angle that people can't see. As Liam said, I'm Natural Capital Strategy and Planning Manager for United Utilities, and we've got a real focus on kind of how we can change the way that we deliver our investments to look at putting a focus on improvements in natural capital, and how we can use nature-based solutions, and delivering through partnership, working with NGOs, local authorities, other businesses, we see as being a really key element in how we can kind of achieve our goals. We've got a long history of working in catchments with our Sustainable Catchment Management Plan, which was very focused on how we could deliver deliver raw water quality improvements and use the kind of savings of investing in our upland catchments to offset costs at our downstream treatment works. And by doing that, we were able to deliver a lot greater benefit in terms of things like biodiversity, peatland restoration, and all those sorts of activities. We kind of realised, though, that that wasn't the whole picture of our involvement with catchments, and we therefore wanted to really look at how our full service chain, from our wastewater treatment side to our clean water to our bioresources, all impacted on those catchments, and how, if we thought about that whole system, we could use a catchment systems thinking approach to actually identify better interventions that could deliver greater benefits in the long term, and aligning those needs beyond United Utilities requirements, but also picking up the needs of all of the other players within those catchments to really deliver in a truly joined up way right across the full catchment. And engaging other partners is absolutely key to that. The Environment Agency's recent Challenges and Choices consultation stated that in the context of WFD, the Water Framework Directive, at our current rate of progress, it's going to take us about 200 years to meet the challenge that we set ourselves of achieving 75% of rivers at good ecological status. 200 years is nowhere near good enough, but working in the same way will never get us there quicker. We need to think differently and engage other partners in how we can really provide a step change in that kind of environmental improvement. And no industry can do it alone. We need to work as partnership to really make that happen. So a couple of key examples we've got of where we've tried to use different approaches to take a different view of how we can do things. One key one is in the petrol catchment in Cumbria, up in the Eden around kind of Penrith, Carlisle, where we had a challenge to deliver phosphorus improvements on some very small treatment works, and we didn't believe it was going to be best value for our customers to do that. So by thinking about the catchment on the whole and that full picture, we identified that actually there were other challenges going on in that catchment. Agriculture was having a big impact, and we felt we could deliver better benefits by actually working with the agricultural community to see how we could kind of remove some of that pollution at source rather than treating it at the back end through our treatment works. Delivered a more efficient option for our customers and was better aligned to the needs of the catchment and supported local kind of economy as well. Through that process, we also identified how we could potentially align the work we were doing with other organizations. So Nestle were also delivering investment in the same area. They wanted to achieve very different things to us, but we were able to actually align what we were trying to achieve because we were all fundamentally investing in the same natural assets within those catchments. And therefore our investments were delivering co-benefits to them, theirs were delivering co-benefits to us. So without actually increasing the spend we were putting in, we were delivering far greater results and really driving that benefit for our customers. And delivering that through kind of a market-based approach also was really key in trying to create a viable revenue stream for farmers and landowners to be trying to access. So they weren't just focused on how they could drive greater food production, but actually how they could deliver in a more sustainable way, creating kind of revenue into their businesses for delivering water quality improvement. We've still at the early stages of starting that market process, but we're really keen to keep that driving as we keep going. We do recognise, though, that all catchments are different, and what works in one won't necessarily work right across all of the catchments. So we're also working in the Wyre catchment in the Fylde to look at how the specific needs of that catchment could potentially be delivered in a similar way, but particularly tailored into what's required there. So the big challenge there is flooding, with significant communities that have had large elements of flooding over the last many years. And one of the things we identified was that whilst there was interventions that could be delivered to alleviate that, the benefits never really stacked up for any one organisation to deliver that on their own. So we worked with companies that do flood insurance, with Floodry, with the Environment Agency, ourselves, the local authorities, with the support of the Rivers Trust and funding coming from Esme Fairburn to help facilitate all of this activity, to really understand what the benefits case was for the different organizations and look at how we could potentially use a different funding model to try and make those benefits be delivered. We prioritized what needed to be done in terms of natural flood management and what we could achieve through doing that. And we're just in the place now of getting the beneficiaries of that to agree to a payments for outcomes method. So committing that once those interventions are delivered based on what is achieved from them, they will then deliver payment. And based on that kind of ongoing and sustainable revenue stream, it then allows the Rivers Trust through a special purpose vehicle to actually draw in kind of commercial investment to provide the upfront capital to make those natural interventions happen. It's a very different approach to how we do it. And there are some beneficiaries that really do want to go to the traditional upfront investment. And that's great because it's a really efficient way to do it from a delivery point of view. But actually to really get that overall kind of money flowing in a more effective way and allow that step change in delivery, we need to look at how we can blend those financial models, getting that upfront investment in where appropriate, but looking at sustainable long-term revenue streams to allow commercial investment to get the delivery actually happening on the ground. It's a very different approach to how we kind of manage that risk process. But by thinking about things in that way, we believe there's a really good opportunity to draw in multiple partners, multiple beneficiaries, and really provide a step change in delivery. Thanks, Liam. I think that covers most of what we wanted to say.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. Lots of points that we want to pick up there. I'm going to move us swiftly on and introduce, last but not least, our final speaker, Kene Umiasiebu. Kene is Campaigns Director at Tesco and responsible for leading the company's stakeholder engagement and position development on key issues, including environment, packaging, sourcing, and food waste. Welcome, Kene.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So to start with introducing myself, I'm a black man, 6'2" tall. I often kind of wonder where time went. I turned 46 this year and I still can't believe it. I live in North London, looking out my window into the foggy outline of London in the distance. And I always envy people who can start their talk with a very nice joke. I've tried so many times to find an appropriate joke and I'm completely pathetic at it. So I've just decided that environmental sustainability is no laughing matter, so no jokes from me. Yeah, so I'll go straight into it. The question was, is it time to try something new? And I think in asking that question, we kind of know the answer. A simple answer is absolutely yes. But then the difficulty of trying something new is that there's a multitude of options of what new can be, whereas we all know what the old is, so we can just do it because it's safe. I just wanted to start with kind of a reflection of what I've observed in my time in environment and sustainability overall. And it is that actually we're beginning to see some of the results of the work that people like Gillian and Sir David Attenborough and so many others have done in raising our awareness and our passion, our interest in this subject of sustainability. That I think there are lots of people who are more conscious about this subject and who have made the decision as individuals to never be part of the problem. And this is quite an important turning point for society, that for the first time, you can argue, a significant, potentially majority of the population, at least in the UK, have made a conscious decision that they want to know what their footprint is, they want to know what their impact is, and they want to not be part of the problem. And this is something to celebrate. This is something to never lose sight of. However, because of the time we're in, the generation we've got to, and the state of the world, not wanting to be part of the problem is no longer enough. We need enough people. It doesn't have to be everyone, but we need enough people who are actually passionate and keen to be part of the solution. So not to be in a neutral place, but I saw lots of young people marching during the Black Lives Matter protest, and some of them have placards saying it's not enough to be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist. This is something similar to that. Now, I see that in the journey that a number of companies are making as well. So at Tesco, about 6-7 years ago, our overarching environmental sustainability ambition was to reduce our impact on the environment. today, our sustainability ambition is to lead the industry in addressing the sustainability challenges that we all face. So something going from, I don't want to be part of the problem, to actually, I want to be part of solving the problem and being who we are as a company. We want to be leading that conversation, not simply waiting to respond to nudges from others. And in order to achieve that, we set out for ourselves a three-pronged approach of how we act on environmental sustainability, indeed on all sustainability as a business. And it's a three-step approach to improve, to transform, and to advocate. To improve is the starting point, and it's still where many organizations and many individuals are, that we do a little bit better than we did last year. We do better than our peers, we do better than our competitors, and we drive incremental change. Now that's important, and it's an important starting point. It creates inspiration for action, it creates case studies, it creates examples of change. But I'm afraid where we are today, improvement, especially incremental improvement, is not going to be enough. It's important, yes, but it's not going to be enough. And that's why we have the next stage, which is to transform. There are aspects in which we need transformational change. As examples, for many years as an organization, as Tesco, we focused our climate change strategy on energy efficiency, on changing light bulbs to energy efficient ones, on putting alarm systems on doors of our freezers in stores, on putting light sensors and so on and so forth. Those were important. They saved us lots of money, made hundreds of millions of pounds in electricity bill a year. But we weren't on track to meet what the science said that we needed to do in order to fight climate change, in order to be on a 2-degree trajectory, never mind 1.5-degree trajectory. When we mapped that, we saw actually we needed to transform where we sourced our energy. So that, yes, important to do all the energy efficiency work, but we also needed to switch our energy sources from fossil fuels to renewables. And that's why we made that switch. The same with vehicles, which is why we made the move to electric vehicles, and also doing the same for customers, installing charging points for them. The same with food, doing everything we can to make sure that the food we sell is free from deforestation, switching to zero deforestation soy, as is in our plan. But what we're seeing is that at the rates of consumption, at the rates of food waste, we're not going to be able to do that just by improving what we have now. Hence why we announced a few months ago a 300% target to increase plant-based meat alternatives, because you need both the improvement, but you also need the transformation. And then to the third point, we actually often can't achieve the level of transformation that's needed without others going on that journey with us, without government setting a level playing field, because in the end, we're a business and we want to not be at a disadvantage, because then the change that we want to drive will not be sustainable. And sometimes it needs us to use our voice, to influence, to lobby, to ask the government to set a level playing field. So we used our voice to call on the government to set the due diligence requirements to avoid deforestation abroad. And hence why the government, it wasn't the only reason, but I like to think that our voice was one of those that encouraged the government to introduce the consultation on forest protection due diligence, and now it's making its way through law. It's not as far as we'd like. It focuses only on illegal deforestation. We want it to focus on zero deforestation, and we continue to call for that. And the same, we also are using our voice to ask the government to introduce a consistent national recycling infrastructure, so that when we put recyclable packaging in the market, it actually gets collected and gets recycled. Because if what Lambeth collects is different from what another kind of council in Manchester collects, then even if your products are all in recyclable packaging, they don't get collected, they don't get recycled, and the aim is defeated. And I think the same also applies to a number of non-profit organizations, environmental charities. I've seen lots of them who want to make a difference in the life of the whale, in the life of one elephant, in the life of this patch of land. And that's important. It's very important we keep the hope alive, we keep examples going. Obviously, it's not going to be enough. We need to get to the stage where we're changing the system in which we are operating. And those case studies can be the basis on which we say, what would it take to scale things up? How do we introduce, for instance, into policy, some of the learnings that we're learning in kind of in food waste reduction at home, in water catchment improvement around the country? How can we feed that into government policy that it becomes the basis on which everything is done? And if you know, amongst the things we've learned this year in the lockdown, in the COVID and the debates, is actually we start to understand how humans tend to behave when something is inconvenient. So when Al Gore called his movie An Inconvenient Truth, it was kind of difficult. For me, at least, the insight I got into that was deepened by the way people reacted to COVID. Simply because something is inconvenient, we can choose to ignore the science, even at the risk of ill health for ourselves and our loved ones. That gives you a sense of the mammoth task we have to go through in saving or protecting the natural world. When you're telling people that, you know, the climate might change irrevocably in the next 100 years, and the next 50 years, if you imagine that they wouldn't wear a cloth covering on their face for 1 week, why would they change their lives so radically just out of personal choice to save the planet in 50 years' time? That gives you the scale of the challenge. And so one of the things that I think, if I end on this, that the one thing that I think needs to change is that a lot of us, we're in this situation where everyone who cares about sustainability is saying to themselves and to all around them, somebody has to get up and do something. Someone has to get up and do something. A little bit like when you want everyone to be quiet and everyone goes, shh, and then everyone is making a noise and nobody shuts their mouth. I think we have a lot of people who can talk about sustainability, who can do minor case studies around the world, and that these are all important. What we don't have enough of are people who know how to roll up their sleeves and get to work, who know how to create a new reality dealing with the world as we know it, not expecting a world of angels, a world of saints, no, but dealing with the world with the limitations it has right now. And that's the area that I think we need to do differently. We need to be asking ourselves, how do we scale what we have? And how do we create more practitioners to complement the educators and the storytellers that we have amongst us? So I'll end there for now. But yes, the answer to the question is yes, we need to do something differently. And what we need to do differently is more action to complement the talk. Not less talk, but more action to match the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Kene. Wow, what fantastic insights that we've got this morning from our panel. We've heard about the importance of trust and integrity in storytelling. Kiran's view that now there's been no time stronger now to get corporate interest and develop entrepreneurial ways of dealing with these critical issues. Jim's point around different finance models and some practical examples of where partners are coming together because we can't wait 200 years for our rivers to get better. And Kene, your powerful call to action for more actions and moving individuals from not wanting to be part of the problem to being actually part of the solution, I think is a very positive note to open up to discussions. Now, we've had loads of questions flying in. I'm going to use my facilitator's prerogative just to ask Caroline a brief question. Jim touched on investment, and there are a lot of people we could have on the panel, ranging from farmers to community groups and fishers. One group not represented are investors, or not directly represented are investors. I wonder whether, Caroline, whether you could say a few words about the increasing role for investors and investment in driving some of these changes.
Thanks, Liam. Just very quickly, I would say that 5 years ago, even, the idea that the investment community or investment finance would be a key player in this was absurd. You know, the finance industry was way behind, and in fact it still is, but there is beginning to be a real awareness of the, you know, investment isn't neutral. When money is invested, it gets invested into organizations, and organizations do things, and they have customers, and so everything is part of a circle. So if we don't want wet wipes, we need to stop buying wet wipes, because if we keep on buying them, the companies that make them keep on making profits out of them, and therefore investors will invest in them. So we have to tackle this from all angles. including our pensions, our investments, our savings. We can have a voice through that. And as ESME, we can also challenge the investment community to think differently about impact. But I'd just like to quickly ask Kene whether he thinks shareholder activism or shareholder pressure is helpful for organisations like Tesco's to be able to push slightly harder internally or externally.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, two examples on that actually. I mean, maybe I start by saying that yes, it's helpful. It's not enough. It also is important that there are those internally within the organization who are working to answer to those calls. But of course, definitely, questions from investors can strengthen the argument on these issues. Two examples that come to mind, it was an investor group, I think it was Share Action, who asked a question at an AGM at Tesco that was the final nudge over the line for an already advanced stage development of our renewable electricity strategy. But asking that question placed it, short-circuited it and placed it on the chairman and CEO's radar. And so everything else we'd worked behind the scenes that was still making its way up the organization got put forward, and we could get to a decision very quickly. And of course, I think earlier this year, BlackRock wrote, which is one of the biggest investors of many organizations, wrote a very passionate, very strongly worded call to action to companies, including ours, on climate change, asking us to take action and so on. That again enabled a lot of initiatives to move forward. And for those who hadn't started, it must have been a call to get going on this. So absolutely, investors asking questions and indicating where the future lies plays a strong role.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask Luna Dizon to help curate some of the questions. The questions are flying in, and there's some really good ones. So if any do capture some of the panelists' attention and you want to reply separately in chat, please do so. But Luna, can you perhaps field the first question, please?
Yeah, sure. There's a few questions just around how we think about partnerships, particularly across different sectors. So trying to bring those all together, it would be great to hear from the panel what they think the main opportunities and for new approaches are around partnership, but also where it doesn't work so well because there's a lack of trust. How can that be addressed? And whether there's somebody who has asked, it's Wes has asked about whether there needs to be some kind of forum or something that could help organizations to build that trust.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to ask Truan to go for that, because Truan, you were very confident about opportunities for collaboration. Where do you see the main opportunities, and anything on trust would be good?
So I think on opportunities, I think where the NGO sector has a real role to play is being that sort of facilitator and catalyst. So what we're always looking for are environmental challenges which are too big for one business to deal with on its own. So how can you bring unusual suspects together, which usually involves getting businesses from across different supply chains, across different sectors. And actually businesses aren't very good at that in many cases. So where you can point to something where lots of organized businesses have a common concern but haven't got enough resource or reach to do it themselves. I think that's where we see the opportunity. And you as a charity can act as the honest broker between all those businesses, but also the local authorities that probably need to get involved, and crucially citizens, and how you can help citizens believe the messages from all those organizations. And I think the advantage of collaboration is it's not owned by one brand, it's owned by a whole variety. So you don't get it sort of the greenwash thing, you get a group of organizations coming together. But I think with all of these things, it takes a lot of time to build trust between each other brand and between the different sectors. So, it's not something you do quickly. You have to do a lot of listening. You have to do a lot of co-creation. But if you get it right, it's something that is financially viable for the NGO, but the impact it can have both in shifting policy and getting citizens and local authorities involved is absolutely significant.
Great, thanks very much, Trewin. I don't know whether Jim or Kene have anything further to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably just say to that I think picking up on what Trewin said around long time, it's absolutely a key point. I think some of the partnership works we've done, we've found it can take 2 to 3 years before you really can get that effective working between multiple organizations. So one of the key kind of things we're looking at is actually how you can start to drive more strategic, long-term, sustainable partnerships, rather than I think sometimes the more opportunistic kind of ones that have come up in the past. We're obviously very focused around water quality and how that works in catchment. So kind of catchment system operation is something we're very keen on, and drawing the right partners together with NGOs, all of those key stakeholders, to really be thinking in the long term about what the strategy is that we would like to achieve, and therefore actually going through kind of funding and delivery options in that really joined up way. And that helps to actually build that long-term trust between those organizations and get those things moving more effectively. So that's, I think, a really key point in how you can drive greater partnership, is really focusing on that long-term sustainability and strategic drivers.
Thanks, Jim. Kenny, anything to add? Okay, thanks. Luna, do you want to move us to our next question, please?
Yeah, just I guess following on from Kenny talking about what they were doing to use their voice to lobby government around the changes that need to happen. There are a few people who are also asking about, what policy changes need to happen. And I guess it would be really also useful to think about, to get from Gillian what she feels we could do to be reaching out to more people to also then lobby government. The change that would happen.
Okay, Gillian, do you want to kick us off on that? How we can tell some of the stories, build trust, and help broaden the interest in Coalition for Change?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sort of listening to everyone else on the panel, and I feel like I'm not the best person to talk about operational changes and issues, because it's not really my experience. I've been a sort of lone operator, self-employed for pretty much my whole working life. So working in big organizations isn't really something I do a lot of. I dip in and out basically. However, something that I have been asked to do more of this year, which is probably the other side of the same coin, is looking at diversity and inclusion, and being asked to speak in from everywhere, from school assemblies to organizations and panels much like this one. And again, for me, I guess there are many sort of operational things we could do. We can sit down, we can have surveys and monitor and record and chart progress. But one of the things that I sort of wonder about, and I've put this forward to people when I've been asked to talk about being actively anti-racist or doing anti-racist work, as Kene referred to earlier in the talk, is I usually ask, the audience, whoever is listening, to ask themselves a question. They don't need to answer it out loud. They never need to answer the question outside of themselves, in their minds, which is, do you really want things to change? Because even looking at the comments, particularly to some of the things I said, the reason why I felt like I needed to start my contribution today, which is looking at the things I don't think I have personally got right, or necessarily the industry, is that's the uncomfortable bit. And that's the bit where I think personally, before we get into the operational changes, or alongside, because we don't have time, a lot of it, is to really ask ourselves this question, like, do we really think we need to change? Do things need to change? Is everything just great the way it is? I mean, clearly from an environmental point of view, I think most of us are convinced it's not great. But it's actually, I find it interesting that it's a question that I'm just flipping back into sort of anti-racist work, that not everyone is going to answer, yes, I think things need to change. And so usually I'll say, you know, do you want things to change, or do you think things are fine the way they are? And if you've answered, I think things are fine the way they are, I'll go, right, okay, well, I'm not here to change your mind about that, but you know, this process is going to happen. And are you prepared to keep one corner of your mind open to the possibility that as you go through the process, you may feel differently about it? So for me, when it comes to organizations wanting to be more inclusive, involve more people in the conversation, get more people on board, make space around the table, all the kind of lovely analogies we use about that. I think, you know, I've heard trust come up a lot today. And I think one of the things is, it's just being honest with ourselves about how much do we really want things to change, and are we willing to embrace that, the uncomfortable parts where actually, okay, this is why I think it needs to change. So that's, you know, that's as much as I can offer, because I really feel that you can put operational things into place, but until you really deal with, you know, hearts and minds, that uncomfortable bit, I don't know how much traction you get and how much trust you get.
Thanks, Gillian. So we're at 12 o'clock now, which is due to our endpoint. I know some people do have to go. I'm going to ask the panel a very last quick fire question, and then those who need to leave can disappear. Certainly, Caroline and I and Esme colleagues will be staying on for about 15 minutes to pick off any of the specific questions to Esme, and do join us for that if you can. So the final kind of quick fire question I was going to ask, we've heard a lot about working with different sectors and different organisations. What would be the one piece of advice that you give to others on working across sectors? So I will ask Kenny to start us off on that, please.
Thank you. I think in working across sectors, reaching out to unlikely allies, it's always important to keep your values and your philosophies in mind, but don't make it stop you from building partnerships. Again, remember, we have to engage with the world as it is in order to create the one we want to see. If you're looking to work with saints and angels, you might not find a lot of them that have any influence to change anything. But keeping your values and your ultimate goal in mind needs to be the partner I'm reaching out to. Are they institutionally blind? Are they willing to change? Are they able to change? Those should be the measures, rather than I don't want to be seen with this partner. Otherwise, you end up speaking into your echo chamber.
Thanks, Kenny. True.
I think Kenny's got it spot on. I think being prepared to listen, being sort of humble, being open-minded about who you will work with, all of those things are important. And then I think it's about being brave. You know, we work with companies that I know a lot of the environmental sector sort of think are the devil. But I think where we feel we have strong values and a strong rationale, you have to be able to stand up and say, we're doing it for these reasons. You might disagree, but we think as an organization and our role in society, this is important for us. You must be able to defend it. You can't hide the relationships if they look a bit awkward on the outside.
Thanks, Truan. Jim.
I think I'd say be focused on the demand for change and really be key on what outcomes people are trying to achieve, and therefore how we can align those to deliver more effectively. It's too easy to kind of end up with a wish list that we really struggle to deliver, and focus on that kind of outcome and where that alignment is can really help to actually build those partnerships and through a delivery route.
Great, thanks very much, Jim. And last but not least, Gillian.
Yeah, I guess, you know, my possibly final thought is about being prepared to work with people who don't necessarily believe exactly what you, or agree with exactly what the way you see things and the kind of future that you want. I saw in Luna's, behind Luna, there was a sign saying community's kindness. And I think that's wonderful when it is. But I live in a small town in Cornwall, and I would say that, you know, what I've learned about here is that community is actually being able to work together for a common aim, even when we don't all see eye to eye and agree on everything. And that's when it feels really good.
Thank you, Gillian. So I'm just going to pause point so people who need to go can go, and then hand back to Luna to ask a couple more questions, and we will end by 12:15. Oh.
I might just go ahead and people can leave as they wish, but we'll get on with I wanted to ask the panel a question from Dan Crossley, because we've been focusing on new ways and new ideas. So he says, or they say, we shouldn't seek novelty for novelty's sake, and aren't lots of the solutions already out there, just not evenly distributed? So it'd be great to just have the panel's thoughts on that.
So who wants to go first on that?
I'll go quickly. I mean, there are loads of great things happening out there, but quite a lot of them are pilots, and you know, you get pilot scheme after pilot scheme or test scheme after test scheme. And I think it goes back to the point that Jim made about longevity and scale, and Kenny's point as well, which is, you know, when you embark on these partnerships and these campaigns, you need to think about what the long-term aim is. And on most of them, there'll be a policy element involved. So I think there's some great initiatives out there, but I think we have to get through the pilot phase without a long-term, really bold ambition to achieve the structural change that Kenny was referring to.
Thanks, Trin. Anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with Trin, and I think there's a question, that's a fair point. Do we need to do something new, or do we need to do something different? So it might be that the idea is an old idea that is relevant, you know, but the way we go about it is completely wrong. I often think about innovation. When I talk to people about innovation, the thing that excites them the most are the new ideas that has just been invented in some garage in Oxford or Cambridge that has never gone anywhere. That's what everyone gets excited about. But actually, there are thousands of innovations that we are used to because they're not that new anymore, but it hasn't been deployed to any great extent. I mean, to think that how many years later after the invention of renewable electricity, it's still novel. We haven't still deployed it at scale. So I think that there are those individuals and small scale organizations who have a big contribution to make in discovering something new. And then there are the role of those other more established organizations such as ourselves who have a role to play to scale them up when they're proven to work. And I think the new approach I'm thinking about is not whether we abandon renewable electricity as an example, for instance, or rather try something new. It's not enough to put it on the cover page of your magazine, on your website. Actually, the goal is to give it scale, to make it mainstream. That's where we haven't quite succeeded as a society, not just our company. As a society, we chase after new stuff and don't try to bed them down.
Thank you, Kenny.
So just,
Gillian,
sorry.
You wanted to say something, Gillian?
Yeah,
and then
I just wanted to add just in answer to that question about, I'm wondering if the sort of leaning into natural climate solutions and also natural solutions in terms of habitat restoration. I mean, I would say, you know, I'm a real believer in putting more faith in natural solutions in terms of restoring habitat than coming up with innovation. So yes, definitely there are solutions available. And also just to kind of tap into something that Kenny said right at the beginning of his talk about having more practitioners, people willing to roll up their sleeves and actually know how to make these changes. I couldn't agree more with that. And, you know, I'm definitely in the storyteller camp, you know, rather than the practitioner camp. But there are some really interesting examples of that, particularly with natural habitat restoration and natural climate solutions. I'm thinking specifically of Derek Gow, who many people will, you know, be familiar with his story in terms of the beaver reintroductions and the work that he did. And, you know, a lot of what he did was being, you know, quite a sort of radical and a renegade in some ways. His book is, you know, a plug for his book, but his book is a great testament to how he went about that, and having to navigate where he could get around policy and legislation, and places where he just thought, I'm going to have to blow past this to make these changes happen. I think that's a really inspiring story. So just want to put out there in case, you know, anyone out there hasn't heard of Derek, but yeah.
Thanks, Gillian. Luna, should we have a final question?
Yes, so just one for us really, from Lewin Evans. The new strategy looks to be quite focused on land management, restoration of habitats, reducing flood risk, etc. Is there still space for organisations or projects which are more focused on engaging, educating, inspiring people about nature, conservation and sustainability?
Good question. I don't know whether Caroline wants to have a go at that one first. Caroline, do you want to have a stab at
that? Yes, definitely. We funded the Citizens
Citizens Assembly.
Yes, thank you. The Citizens Assembly work, and we're also looking at, you know, the role of the consumer. As I said, the role of people as investors through organisations like Share Action. So, but also all of our work, we hope will link to engaging communities and people. So even though it's about natural flood management, obviously the communities that are based there need to be part of that conversation. So yes, definitely. Liam, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I mean, our three impact areas are restoring our natural world, fairer futures and creative, confident communities, and the great stuff happens at the intersection between all three of those. So yeah, short answer is yes. Luna, dare I squeeze in one more quick question?
Yep, sure. So we've got one here from Sarah Swindley. She asks, how do we ensure these aren't urban versus rural centric conversations? So there is a conceit that suggests this is educated people in the cities telling those in rural communities how to do it, though she says that's not what she thinks.
That's a good question. It's a hard one, so I'm going to ask the panel to have a go on that. Anyone want to make a start on that?
I'm so sorry, Liam. I had a bit of like freezing, so I didn't catch what the question was.
It was, how do we ensure these aren't urban versus rural centric conversations?
Any comments on that?
Can I make a comment, Liam?
Please do.
I just wanted to refer back to a point I think that Kene made, which different solutions work in different places. And I think we know that. And again, making sure that the people within the places where this work is happening are fundamentally involved in the process, whether that's urban or rural. I think they are very different, and we need to make sure that, you know, we don't try and skew things either way. But I don't think there's a single model here. I think we have to be cognizant that different solutions will work in different places.
I think that's a really important point, and I think one of the key elements for me is that true partnership isn't about me encouraging other people to do things that I need to happen. It's about actually really working together to understand what the right way to deliver mutual goals is. And I think if you approach it in that way, working with people, because I think reading the comment, there was kind of an element that came through that it felt a bit like kind of urban people telling rural people how they should be managing land and those sorts of concerns. It can't be about that. It's got to be about how we can work together. And when we're looking at how we can kind of create markets and things like that, it's about saying, actually, how can we as a community really reward people for the societal benefits that can be delivered from landscapes, rather than just small elements of what that is. So not telling people this is how the land should be managed, actually creating the mechanisms that society really truly values what those landscapes are delivering and is able to reward people for helping to deliver those.
And can I, just build on that? We've got to have confidence in what our core message is here. I mean, our core message is, we want to create a better environment where people can thrive and flourish and enjoy life. That hangs true wherever you are, in whatever part of society. And I think we make it so complicated, this discussion and this debate. And we make it so hard for people to relate to it because we use a language and an approach which is just a barrier to a lot of people's basic emotional connections. So, I think one of the things we could really all learn is how do we make this relevant and authentic and believable to people? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is what everybody would like to see, which is a better place to live.
I think that is a really nice point to end, True, and not least because it's 12:15 now. Can I thank all the panelists for their insights and time today. Really enjoyed it, really valued your contributions. Can I thank all of our attendees for joining us this morning, and all the wonderful questions you've asked. We've only skimmed the surface of this. We could be here all day, I'm sure. A couple of just reminders. There will be a video and transcript of this website on our webinar soon, and so you can check up on that. And the recordings of our first two webinars on a fairer future and creative confident communities are also on our website. We have another seminar planned in January, 14th of January, details on our website that will do the nuts and bolts of our process and strategy. So there'll be further information, a real deep dive for those organisations wanting to work with us. And we'll be on Twitter this afternoon from 2 o'clock answering further specific questions. So I think that all that remains is for me to thank you all for your engagement and inputs. We've had a really rich conversation this morning with some practical suggestions, examples, and appetite for change. Do more of the good stuff, more action, and a greater range of partners. So thank you for engaging and joining us, and we look forward to working with you in the coming years. Thank you very much.